The aim of this session is to share a flavour of 20 years of the SNP, a network which today, as we've heard, is founded on friendship, keen to share lessons learned rather than grandstanding, and to achieve impact and benefit for the people of both nations. To help us delve into the past, the present, and to touch on the future, three of the organisation's chairs, professors, Ken Ross, Heather Kubi, and Jeremy Bagg, and we're going to hear from Willan, the country director of Banana Box Plus, Malawi, shortly as well. Now, if Steve's recollection of me passing on that the Indian lady had introduced him as short, fat, white, bald man with glasses, the panel might be slightly trepidatious right now as to what the tallish, fat, white, balding man with glasses is going to say about them. So, from the early 2000s, Ken Ross was much involved in the inception of the SNP and chaired our board from 2004 to 2006. Then from 2010 until stepping down in June 2019 to enable him, with the best possible excuse, to return to live and work in Malawi, where he took up a senior role with the Church of Scotland as the Kirk's new mission partner in Malawi. Ken was made an OBE in 2013 for his services to the community in Malawi and to Scotland-Malawi relations. Kenneth R. Ross has published many authoritative books and articles on Malawi, and most recently co-edited Malawi at 60, a political and economic analysis, and is the brains behind the governance webinar that we've been running, and there will be another couple of editions of that to come online. Reverend Professor Ken Ross is Professor of Theology and Dean of Postgraduate Studies at Zomba Theological University.
Well, thank you very much, Stuart, for the very generous introduction. Only you've got me worried that I'm the one holding people back from the gin and tonic. So I'm not sure how popular this talk is going to be. But I thought to put the 20 years that we're marking in perspective, it would be good to recall the Scotland-Malawi landscape in the late 1990s. I was very aware of this landscape because as a family we returned to Scotland after about a decade or so of living in Zomba in the late 90s, and of course still with our head full of Malawi, and it was really great to find that there were people in Scotland who were Malawi connected and interested and had a kind of informal connection that was often described as the Malawi mafia. And I was delighted to be drawn into this group, people of wonderful character and gifts, very passionate about Malawi. But one thing I was also aware of was that it was very much an aging group. People who were senior citizens like I am now. And while it was great to be part of this, you could get a sense that this whole Scotland-Malawi thing was kind of on its last legs, another decade or two, and it was going to be fading out of the scene, however inspirational it had been in its time. And so that gave me some concern. There wasn't really much evidence that there was any kind of renewal coming. But then, if I fast forward 10 years, I'm coming to SNP youth events, some of them in this building, with hundreds of teenagers, all passionate about Malawi, learning more about it, many of them with links through their schools or community groups, having been on visits. So there was a dramatic rejuvenation of the whole thing in that period. And it started in a very small way. As Tracy was talking earlier, Strathclyde was part of it because it had its Millennium Project, and I think perhaps more than it might have guessed, that turned out to be a spark that kind of lit a fire, because lots of people connected from all over Scotland. And in those early 2000s, at the end of the working day, we used to come here to Strathclyde at 6 or 7 in the evening, and we'd come to Peter West's office just across the road, and Strathclyde would lay on sandwiches, and we'd work on into the evening, trying to imagine how this network could be organised. So thanks to Strathclyde for the sandwiches. That might have been the secret of where we are today. And again, more than we could have imagined, this we didn't really know where it was going, but it meant when it came to 2005 and the Scottish government was motivated for international development, that there was a kind of ready-made opportunity, because there was this big mobilization of all of Scotland's Malawi connections. And so it turned out that it was very strategic and timely. And it's been thrilling really to see how that has built over the 20 years. And I think one of the big secrets of its success, and this has probably been true for 150 years or whatever it is the reciprocity, that it's a two-way street. I mean, people who've been involved between Scotland and Malawi have always known that. I think there's been a kind of popular image that this is about Scotland helping Malawi, but all of the Scots, I think everyone I've spoken to without exception, Scots who have lived and worked in Malawi, whatever they've been doing, they've always said at the end, I received far more than I could ever possibly give back. So Malawi has been giving to Scotland, but it was in a kind of incalculable way. And I think in this period, more than before, there's been a certain structured and organised character to the reciprocity. And that's been driven by two things that I think have been really important to it. And one is that in this period, there has been a significant number of Malawians who've been living in Scotland and have been part of this movement. Now, it's not a new thing to have Malawians in Scotland. There's been Malawians here since the 1880s. But I think more than before, there's been a body of Malawians living long-term in Scotland, contributing in different fields. And although it is quite challenging to be in diaspora, there's been many of those Malawians who've committed their time and energy and imagination to the partnership. And so there's been Malawian members on the board, I think all the time. And there's been Malawian voices shaping different initiatives that have been taken. So that has been a really significant and distinctive part of this 20-year period, I would say. And the other thing is having masked the Malawi-Scotland partnership at the other end, and on the Malawi side, so that SNP is not working just alone on the Scottish side. It's got its counterpart. And it's not that one is in charge of the other, or one is a branch of the other. They stand each on their own, distinct and different, able to do their own thing, but constantly collaborating. And that's a very innovative thing. I've not heard of this happening much in the field of international development. So the role of the Malawi-Scotland partnership, I think, has enabled us to do something really distinctive and exciting and promising in this period. Of course, you can have great ideas and you can have great structures, but if you don't have the people to implement, you're not going to do much. And I must take the opportunity to say I think a lot of what has made this 20 years such a success has been the quality of the people who've been involved. The members, yes, but particularly those who've served on the board. And all the time I was involved, I hope for Heather and Jeremy it's been the same. We've just had a fantastic board. I mean, I seem to have had to chair a lot of committees and boards and councils and whatnot in my life, but definitely my favourite one is the SNP board. No doubts about it. And I think it's because of the Malawi unifying factor. It's people with all different identities and different affiliations and different backgrounds, but I think it's the most harmonious group that I've worked with at this kind of level. And then, of course, the board can't do much without the staff. But in the entire period, we've had exceptionally talented and committed staff on the SNP. And I think probably that is more than any other single factor. That is what has enabled the SNP to punch above its weight. I should mention also the government. Peter West talked a little about that earlier, but I think it's important to remember that in 2005, two different things happened. One was the Intergovernmental Cooperation Agreement was signed, and the other was the SNP became a registered charity. Now these were two different things, but always interconnected. And it means in the 20-year journey, there's been government and there's been the SNP network. And they're very different to each other. So you've got all the systems and structures of government on the one hand. On the other hand, you've got this diffuse, amorphic collection of individuals and families and community groups and organizations of all different shapes and sizes. So there's very, very different dynamics, but they have been able to journey together, and they've been complementary to each other. And in fact, they actually need each other, because it would be difficult for the government to keep up the Malawi commitment if there was not a groundswell of public support. But equally, it's difficult to mobilize civil society without government support. So they actually needed each other, and I think it's been a very creative symbiosis. Not always easy, but very creative and productive. And as Peter did, I must pay tribute to Scotland's political leaders, that I think without exception, they've always seen that this Scotland-Malawi engagement is a national commitment that transcends whatever domestic political differences we might have at any time. And Parliament has also played its part in this. We should remember that the very beginning of all this was the Malawi After Glen Eagles conference hosted in the Scottish Parliament. And Parliament has continued to play a role, especially through the cross-party group, which is a constant expression of the fact that this transcends party politics, and it's something to which we can all commit, and a vision that we can all share. So we have to be thankful for all that. And finally, as I look back, and this is a bit of a sobering reflection, in 2005, in some ways, it was a very upbeat kind of time to re-energize Scotland-Malawi relations. If you remember, we had the Make Poverty History campaign, the Labour government of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown was was in office with international development central to their government, a big focus on Africa. We had the Millennium Development Goals. We just had the G8 meeting in Scotland at Gleneagles with a big vision for Africa. It was just a very favourable playing field to say this Scotland-Malawi interaction, we can really make something of it now. Today, I have to say, I think we all know we're in a very different moment. It's a time of division, polarization, fragmentation, fracture. Racism is rising. Xenophobia is resurgent. Governments are cutting international aid budgets. They're increasing defense budgets. That's the reality of the world around us. But we, SNP, we are marching to a very different beat. We've heard it today. It's about solidarity, it's about mutual respect, it's about mutual transformation, it's about hope for the future. So much more, I think, that in 2005 we are swimming against the tide. But we need to swim. We are very small. We're just two small countries that somehow in history found each other, decided we need to stick together. But it just might be that in doing that we're doing something that's really important for standing against that tide and working for a better world. So I'm sure it's time I finished. Let me say to Malawians, to Scots, to everyone who wants to be part of this partnership, let's continue to stand together. Let's continue to challenge and inspire each other. Let's continue to be our small part of making a better world. The Amburi Akudani Sen, Zikomo Kambi.
Not a single note used, and I'm fairly confident that Ken could do that in Chichewa as well. A former NHS consultant, clinical scientist, Professor Heather Kubi MBE, has been instrumental in the creation of a national HPV reference library to complement the national introduction of the HPV vaccine in Scotland and changes to the cervical screening programme. Since retirement, Heather has been actively involved in cervical cancer screening and treatment in Malawi, which is one of the highest incidences and the highest mortality of cervical cancer in the world. Heather was elected SNP chair in 2011, succeeding Ken, and was our chair for 5 years until last November, and a trustee for 9 years. Today, Heather chairs our Health Forum. Heather, over to you.
Thank you very much, Stuart. And thank you, Ken, for those amazing words. Just listening to Ken just now, can you imagine what it was like for me trying to take over as chair? It was a daunting experience, and I'm afraid I'm not going to get anything quite as erudite from me just now. But Stuart said, what about some reflections on your time with the SNP? And I don't go back the full 20 years. In fact, probably 20 years ago, I knew Malawi as many of our school children and youngsters knew Malawi. I'd never been to Africa other than Egypt. I knew, of course, about David Livingstone and was very proud of what our involvement, but that was as far as it went until Christine and I, as I began to near retirement, felt we had Scottish expertise that really could benefit countries in Africa, and for which we tried many times to get funding and were successful in Malawi. So it was a kind of roundabout route to try to reach the SNP. So what I'm going to say are just a few words about my 12 years out of the 20 as a member, 9 of them, as Stuart said, as trustee and 5 as chair. And a delight in still being involved a little less intensely than it was at that time. So I've got four sort of adjectives or groups of adjectives, and I think the first one I would say is warmth and welcome. When Christina and I first realised we were likely to get funding for Malawi, and we didn't know very much about Malawi, and we turned to the Scotland-Malawi partnership. So I would reiterate all that Ken was saying about staff, because the staff were absolutely amazing. Our very first meeting, actually with Charlie Bevan at that time, in a cafe, roundabout, just introduced us to information, to helpful facts, and a confidence that she was able to pass on to us that we could do this, we could manage. And it made such a difference to our very first short trip to Malawi. So the Scotland-Malawi partnership staffing is absolutely crucial, and that has remained so. Different people over different times with different skills and different roles, but all very important. But the next thing within that time scale, which really impacted on me, were the partnership principles, which the Scotland-Malawi partnership has had now for, 12 years? They were innovative at the time. Partnership's now a word that's far too widely used and people don't think about it sufficiently. But those principles are at the bedrock of all we stand for and all our links with Malawians and Malawi. They've been our guiding light, I think, in all that we have done with our colleagues and friends in Malawi. The next thing that impressed me, and I guess it was actually one of the reasons that I volunteered to become a trustee, as so many of you have done. I've gained a huge amount from being a trustee. Yes, I've had to spend time, and some of it's been quite hard, but the gain is much more than the giving, even as a trustee, let alone in the country-country relationships. And one of the things that actually opened my eyes was the level to which the Scotland-Malawi partnership was willing to lobby and advocate for things that it felt were relevant and important to Malawi. And I particularly think of the trade agreement, which has existed since Malawi's independence and is not very fair to Malawi. We still need to work on that level and try and get that rather more advantageously. And I have to say, 10 years ago, I guess I wasn't really very knowledgeable about tariffs. Now, of course, this year, it's a common word. But tariff is still important. And advocacy, what can we do both as a country and as individuals? And my fourth one comes back to welcome and warmth and commitment. And that has been the reciprocal part, the bit where actually we've had so much warmth and welcome in Malawi from Malawians. We've made such good friends. Tracy talked about friendships. And these are long-lasting friendships, lifelong friendships. And it's because we have a unique, perhaps it's a unique part of the Scottish psyche, as well as a unique organisation, which is making use of that, and a reciprocal one as that. For me, it's been an enormous privilege. It's been part of my life. No one can take that away. And indeed, I am just both privileged, humbled, and delighted to have had Malawi at the heart of part of my life. Thank you.
And then on to Professor Jeremy Bagg, who was elected chair in January this year. Jeremy Bagg OBE was head of the University of Glasgow Dental School from 2005 to 2021. Emeritus Professor at the University of Glasgow, Jeremy is a former Director of Global Health for the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Glasgow and was made an Honorary Fellow of the Royal College in recognition of his outstanding collaborative work on the Maldent project, of which Jeremy will speak. Jeremy.
Thanks very much, Stuart. You'll be sick of hearing from me today. This is the last time. My two colleagues, very experienced, long-standing chairs of the board. I'm the new boy. I've been in post for less than a year, so I haven't really got many pearls of wisdom as a chair. But the thing for me about the Scotland-Malawi partnership is the partnership bit. And what I just wanted to do was spend a little bit of time, if you'll bear with me, talking about how partnerships and networks have been so important to this Maldent project that we've established in Malawi to train new young dentists and to help the Ministry of Health with oral health policy. And it all started, as these things so often do, over a cup of coffee. Myself and Mupatsa Mapando, who was the principal of the College of Medicine at the time, he'd come with some of his colleagues to the University of Glasgow in 2016, and they were looking at possibilities of research collaborations in the field of biomedicine. And I nearly didn't go to that meeting because by then I'd been a head of a dental school for a good number of years. And what happens to an academic when you become head of a unit is you become a pen pusher, you become a politician, you become an administrator. And I felt pretty washed up as an academic. But the guy who invited me was a good friend of mine. And I thought, this is going to look churlish if I don't go. And about halfway through the morning, we had coffee. And Dr. Mapando said, you know, we've had a couple of goes at setting up a dental school. We'd love a dental school to go along with our medical program, but we just don't seem able to nail it. And they said, well, Bag, he's sitting over there. He looks after our dental school. Maybe you should meet him. So that's when we met for a cup of coffee. And that was the start of the Maldent project. Okay. And that was also the start of a very long-term friendship and a very long-term partnership, both personal, but also between the University of Glasgow, where I was working, and what is now Kamutsu University of Health Sciences. At that time, University of Malawi College of Medicine. And we were very fortunate. We met Ian Nicol, who was one of the senior civil servants that some of you have also probably worked with. At the time, he was in charge of the Scotland-Malawi projects. And we met him for lunch. I mean, everything relates around coffee and lunch. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. And we explained to him, he was out in Malawi by chance when I went out for my first visit in 2017. And we talked to him about what we were trying to do. And he said, you know, we've got some end of year monies. If you could put together 2 or 3 pages of A4, we could maybe give you a little pump priming grant. And we were successful. So we were given £60,000. We used that to bring a team from the College of Medicine in Malawi, led by Mupatsa, to show them our dental school in Glasgow. And Mupatsa's comment was, we were really wetting ourselves because we'd had no idea what a dental school was really like and what we were getting ourselves into. And as a result of that, we were able to work together on the big grant application that eventually has funded this project over 5.5 years. Now, where does the Scotland-Malawi partnership fit into this? Well, I had colleagues at the University of Glasgow, particularly Paul Garside and Alex Mackay, who will be known to many of you, and they brought me along to my first ever AGM and annual gathering. It was at the University of Glasgow at that time in the Union Building. And I must admit, I'd never been to an AGM like it. You know, apart from the little bit of business, it was a fantastic event. We linked up with some guys who were working in the WASH agenda at Strathclyde. Result of that, we ended up doing some work on groundwater fluoride levels. But of course, my other great colleagues, the Smilawi team sitting here, Nigel and Vicky, who were at the marketplace this morning. I think Nigel had sought me out because you'd been working in Malawi long before I had. You were part of Scotland-Malawi partnership. And what that triggered was a whole link up with a group of charity partners. And the Scotland-Malawi partnership right in the middle of that. And then linking into the NHS, our hospital manager at the dental hospital and school heard what we were doing and said, you know, we've got 15 really good dental chairs languishing in the basement. They came out during a clinic refurbishment. Realistically, we're never going to use them again. If you'd like them, you can have them. So we linked up then with the charity Dentaid in Southampton, who had a reputation for servicing and installing equipment. You have to be very careful, as you know, about sending equipment overseas. You have to be sure it's decent equipment, robust, working when it leaves the country and properly installed. They linked us up with Henry Schein, a big dental supply company, the biggest dental supply company in the country. As I mentioned this morning, they were happy to give us technical support, send engineers out with us to install all this equipment. And through that charity link, we also linked up with Bridge to Aid, another oral health charity. So the story here is that these networks all start linking together, and you all bring these different skills to the big problem. Having worked in academia for many years, I had lots of links into universities, and one of the major roles these university teams have had is to help us with flying faculty. So we send in teams of academics from the UK, but also from more broadly, from South Africa and so on, to help support the new course. So all of these different links have come about through personal networks, but also through the help of organisations like the Scotland-Malawi Partnership. Days like today, and I mentioned this morning the link that we now have with Amica, which has proved to be a really strong link, not only in terms of infrastructure, but also in managing scholarships, and some of those scholarships are Malawi scholarships. So the whole thing is just a totally interconnected network. And I think without that, actually, we'd have been nowhere. And I have to say, major thanks to the Scottish Government for the funding, because frankly, without that funding, this project would never have got off the ground. I think that's all I want to say, Stuart. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Jeremy. I'd also like to pay tribute to the very many past trustees and staff members of the SNP, and to also make particular mention of David Hope-Jones, who many of you will know was the principal officer and then CEO for 15 years and was extremely dedicated to the development of the SNP and an absolute powerhouse. As Jeremy says, without the funding from the Scottish Government, we would be a very different shape of organisation. And the partnership of the Malawi-Scotland partnership, we are just one side of a two-sided coin. Now, turning briefly to the future, again, the slightly longer future is a Malawi gin and tonic, so just hang on in there for just a little bit longer. But the future, I'd like to introduce Willan Kumwenda, who is the country director for Banana Box Plus in Malawi. And I say the future, not imagining that there's a one-size-fits-all and there can be a cut and paste of one idea and one institution. But Willan is part, as he will tell us, of the community in Ekwendeni, Ekwiweni, of Tafika. And we're going to receive a short video from the Tafika ICT Hub after Willan has spoken. But what I think is distinctive about the Tafika approach is that this is a community-led vision. And what the community are doing is working with a number of SNP members and international NGOs to bring their part of the jigsaw to fit together to achieve the community's vision for a sustainable future. It's not responding to a donor log frame, it's the other way around. And I think that is a decolonised approach. And we have a number of people involved in that project in the SNP, Alan Laverock amongst them. So do please grab him for a conversation after this as well. But let's welcome Willan.
It's always difficult to speak when the chairs of the chairs have spoken, but then I'll try. I'm Willan Kalinda. I'm from Malawi, and I'm the country director of Banana Box Plus, which is Malawian organization. So in 2000, I almost dropped out of school because of hunger. I was coming from school, and then I felt like now going back home, what will I find in the pot? While in the morning in the kitchen there was nothing. So I really felt like now this is the time to drop, that I have to look for pieceworks to do, that I can still find some food to eat. But then one of the statements which echoed in my heart was, I will try, which is a motto of our school. I will try. So I kept on pushing. And in 2013, I met Alan Lovelock, who grabbed my hand up, and then he supported me through the college and the university. And then I became a pillar of my family and the pillar of the community. As I speak today, my younger brothers and sisters, some of them that have graduated because of the works of my hand, which came through Ireland Vlog. And last week, my wife was graduating. So if you speak of a testimony, if you want a living testimony of this partnership, then one is standing in front of you representing many that you have been supporting. So Banana Box, we work with the schools in providing school feeding programs. We are growing coffee. Many of the coffee that we have been taking, I assume some of it has been coming from Malawi. And we are also growing chicken so that we have already developed a sustainable school feeding program. It doesn't mean we are against the donor aid, but then we look at the future. What is the future holding? The donor can stop, but then with what we grow with ourselves, we can sustain the feeding program for the next foreseeable future, and then there can be many winners standing in between that step. So we work with a number of organizations, including Tafika, in behavior change among the youth in Malawi. I shouldn't take much of your time because the chairs might have some questions to take. Thank you so much.